Good morning, and welcome to this our third webinar in collaboration with TLX Technologies, an international fire suppression business which goes back some 20 years when the company was approached by a system manufacturer to jointly develop an actuation technology for their fire suppression systems. The resulting actuator was easy to use and helped make fire suppression systems safer and more secure. TLX has now become something of a household name in the fire suppression market, and its growth has allowed the development of a product portfolio beyond actuation solutions. Today, representing TLX Technologies, Jason Busalacchi and Jensen will discuss regulatory and technological trends and how they are impacting on the fire protection industry. Good morning, Jason and Dennis. The stage is yours.
Hey, good morning, Wendy. Thanks for having us. I'll start with my introduction. Jason Busalacchi, Business Development Manager with TLX Technologies. Been with the company about 8 years. My role within the company is to help position TLX as a technology leader in the fire suppression market. We do this through collaborations with our global customer base to define and develop technology solutions and kind of pave the way for further innovations through participation with associations such as FSSA, Euralarm, and FIA, while building close relationships with the global agencies such as UL and FM.
I'm Dennis Jensen, Business Development Manager, also focused on the advanced product side. My tenure with TLX is a little bit shorter than Jason's. I was recruited in just from my technology background and also the work that I did as publisher of machine design for several years. Go ahead and advance the slide, Janelle.
All right, so today, some of the stuff that we wanted to talk about in the fire protection industry, specifically, in not only the global market, but also the Middle East, is kind of the post-pandemic industry outlook, the globalization of standards that we're seeing more and more of, the substantial growth in the industry, both in the global market and Middle East in particular, and then as well as the standards and technologies that are driving innovation in today's fire suppression market. So just wanted to kind of give you a slide here with some of the associations and influencers that we specifically work with. Many of you probably know these names, UL, NFPA in the United States, FSSA as well, and then Euralarm and FIA in Europe, and then in the UK specifically. And then we wanted to take a moment to recognize the GCC, which is the symbol that I have up on the top, as they are now co-collaborating with some of the United States industry associations to help develop standards globally to help drive innovation in the Middle Eastern market. So the first thing I wanted to talk about this morning is the globalization of standards. So, in recent years, the industry has been witnessing a major shift in how standards are being adopted as a way to drive innovation and safety within the fire suppression market or fire protection market, and specifically in the Middle East. I mean, for example, the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, is working with UL in partnership to create a globalized set of standards more regionally. So it's really going to help bring some of these more stringent codes into the Middle Eastern region. And what the globalization of standards is really going to help with is it progresses technology in developing and emerging markets. It helps level the playing field to help businesses get their share of economic success. And then it also helps disseminate knowledge throughout the market. So, as these globalization of standards moves across the industry, some of the top minds within the field are really being able to put forth their best efforts in helping other countries and regions develop these standards that they've been using for a while now.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, Jason, that for some of that work, especially with people in the Middle East, that again, collaborating with the GCC, they could end up finding themselves and their systems available to be ready for export. So, I think that all that's happening that you picked up on from your conversations from your friends in the industry about these standards is going to be very important for the next several years.
Correct. I would agree as well. So one of the main key points of this presentation as well is the growth in the industry. I mean, currently the valuation of the global fire protection market is $75 billion. And the compounded annual growth rate is predicted to be about 6.3% year over year until 2032. So in the next 10 years, we're going to see an almost doubled valuation in the fire protection market to somewhere around $138 billion. That is a substantial growth in any particular industry over the next 10 years. The Middle East in general, looking at double-digit growth. Saudi Arabia alone, which is the largest of the GCC organization or countries, is predicting a 5.5% compounded annual growth rate by 2025 with a value of $402 million. Much of that growth is being driven by government regulations, stringent fire safety requirements across the globe, advanced fire analysis, and mass adoption of wireless technologies. Wireless technology being one of those things that just isn't going to stop. We're going to see so much more of that moving forward, and I think there's going to be huge opportunities in the market globally and in the Middle East as well. And so where this is going to go, at least from my opinion, is there's going to be significant opportunities in the Middle Eastern region for regional companies in both new installations as well as the retrofit projects to update the systems to the latest standards and innovations. So everybody is going to have a large opportunity to really take their technologies to the next level if they decide to participate.
Yeah, and Jason, I was just thinking about what you were saying with the wireless and the retrofit. It really does make sense from a standpoint now that you wouldn't have to worry about, new construction. It's easy to run the wires and everything else where you need to. But with the combination of, retrofit with wireless, it gives you more of an opportunity to do a lower cost deployment of still a high-end service.
Correct. Because most of the base technology will be there, but as the new standards are adopted, there'll be opportunities to upgrade these systems moving forward. So some of the future challenges that we're seeing in the industry, one of the big ones, workforce migration, and I think that this is something that the entire world is seeing, right? I mean, at least here in the United States, a lot of work from home, aging populations moving out of the workforce, without people coming in and having the previous generations pass that knowledge. A lot of the techniques and ways of moving through this particular industry is not being passed on. So that generation, the knowledge is being lost a bit. And another thing, competition of Novec 1230. That's a bullet point I put in there, but really it comes down to a lot of supply chain issues, not only with Novec but also with control panels and the cylinder tanks themselves, right? So for Novec itself, it being now banned in Europe. FM200 being banned in Europe, that Novec is the go-to clean agent that's going to be used. So you couple that with some of the shutdowns that the Novec plant actually had briefly, all by it, and then the general adoption from multiple companies that the preferred agent is making massive supply chain issues. So you couple all these challenges, and it's something that many of our customers have been facing over the last year and a half. Another one of the challenges that we're looking into and that the market is seeing right now is challenges of lithium ion battery fire protection. Right. I mean, the industry doesn't have a great way of suppressing lithium ion battery fires. I mean, there's plenty of companies that are working on this, but the electrification of the world is moving faster than the innovation in the fire suppression market in general. So that's going to be a big one that we want to keep a close eye on as we move forward.
And I wonder, Jason, if that's going to be something that even adds to the growth that you were talking about. Because when you look at, lithium ion batteries, it's not just, the e-mobility for, cars, scooter, robotic delivery, buses, et cetera. But we've also got the standby power market and then, kind of renewables. And to kind of dive a little bit deeper, because I think this could be a business opportunity for a lot of people in attendance for lithium ion batteries, when they go into thermal runaway, which, for whatever reason, the battery starts to overheat and then cascades, to another cell and another cell, and it gets so much energy that it turns into combustion. And like Jason was saying, there really is, no agent right now that can fully extinguish lithium ion battery fire.
Not
And
officially anyway.
oh yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of research going on right now about it. People will be looking for something. And then from a use of water perspective, it's a lot of water and you're really just trying to control the spread of any type of, battery fire. So I think there's going to be a lot of excitement in that area in the coming years.
Yeah, I would agree. And then one of the last challenge that I'd like to bring up is the technology creation versus adoption. This is something that's as old as the industry itself. It seems. You know, as the fire suppression market becomes more advanced, moving to adopting new codes and standards and technologies is difficult unless the technology itself has already been developed. So a lot of the companies that want to engage in developing new technologies for this market need to have a long-term approach when they're investigating and defining and developing new technology, and they gotta in a lot of ways be okay with the long-term prospect rather than ensuring that it's going to be a quick flip on an ROI, simply because once you create the technology, then it takes time to get it adopted, and then once it's adopted, it then takes time to get it fully through the market. And we had that some time ago with our supervision technologies. I mean, we created it some 6-8 years ago, and finally now it's one of the leading technologies that is out there. But that's just an example of what I'm referencing when I'm talking about that.
Yeah. And if we go on to the next slide, I think that Jason has the perfect lead in, the idea that supervision is a great example of where technology and standards come together. I mean, we've all heard the stories about the challenges, be it with installation or ongoing maintenance, the biannual audits where something goes wrong, and whether it's the actuator or the deluge water valve does not get put back on correctly. And so those problems caused enough concern that, just as Jason was describing, right? This is just a perfect example. There's discussions about how do we regulatorily protect the industry and end users and the people that might be in the building, while also trying to get the technology to support those regulations. And what you end up getting is before the standards roll out, just like Jason was saying with supervision, you actually have the technology available that that customers can buy. And we've got a couple examples up here on the left. We're showing a gaseous system actuator, and the supervisory switch is located in the bottom section, that brass connector. And then on the right is a water deluge system. Again, the supervisory switch is located on the bottom. And in kind of both instances, these are kind of the way that TLX did the innovation. There are other ways of doing it in the marketplace, but what our engineers thought is they wanted something that was all incorporated into one product, so there wasn't multiple parts to really meet the standard.
Yeah, and Dennis, I just really quick, Janelle, if you could go back one slide. I just what I wanted to bring up quickly is I was talking about the globalizations of standards earlier. Right. So this is a perfect example of this. This is something that UL and NFPA required that went into public commentary back in probably 2013, 2014, and the supervision requirement was adopted in 2016. So through the years, this technology has spread across the global market to a point that the EN and ISO spec in Europe and the UK are now taking those same exact standards for requirement of supervision on removable device actuation devices and adopting those standards coming in 2023. So I just wanted to show an example of what I was talking about when it came to globalization of standards in a very specific way.
Yeah, cool. So in jumping forward a little bit, now we've got something, we'll call it a current issue that a lot of people are worried about, more and more discussion about it. We get these micro leaks, whether it's a small hole in the cylinder or something along with where the tank mates to the rest of the equipment. You get this issue where a small amount of gas or agent is leaking out of the system. And, it's not a lot that you'll notice it on a day or even a week, but over time, you're definitely going to have an issue. Possibly the system will be compromised eventually. And the image on the right actually, highlights that. When you've got the tank to the far right, you can see the green line there on the monitoring system. There's definitely more agent. And on the left, right where the tank mates with the collar, you can see there's a little bit of gas/agent escaping. And so that loss over time gets to be a problem. And rest assured, kind of how that it always works out, that you're not going to notice that there's a problem on the 2 days that the biannual audits happen. It's at the most inconvenient time. So the thing that I think that ends up being really important when it comes to this type of issue is trying to figure out a way to understand that there's a problem before it reaches critical stature, where the tank has to be decommissioned. And if there is some way that instead of now having to do a major repair or, major upheaval in the system, you can actually just do an on-site update, that ends up being critical.
I think this is another one of those situations where you could effectively, adopt wireless versions of technologies to this so that you're sending out, because as you would say, right? I mean, none of this happens at a convenient time. And so,
right.
There might be, you might be able to be, wirelessly, if you're monitoring remotely from, I don't know, halfway across the world or something like that, you can even log into the system itself and maybe, witness a trend line and say, over 6 months, I'm seeing these losses throughout the tank. Well, how do you fix that? Right. And I mean, those are things that, we're seeing as issues, and how maybe even wireless technology can adapt to this at some point in time down the road.
Yeah. But I think that this is a good example. If we jump to the next slide, whether it's micro leaks or something else, what we're really talking about is we have to have more confidence in system readiness, right? I mean, the biannual audits are great. It's regulatorily required, but there's still a lot of value to end users and the rest of the industry. It's an opportunity to, for people to connect, the maintenance people and the end customer to make sure that the system is in good working order. Maybe talk about technology or any adjustments that could be made to improve the system. But just like Jason was saying, things don't go wrong on the 2 days that somebody happens to be there, right? So the reason we need improved visibility is, what do we do about the other 360 plus days, so we can sleep at night knowing the system will work to save lives and our facilities. And from my perspective, what I see is that integration of sensing. So whether it's agent level, shock, actuator firing, agent weight, temperature, all those things provide valuable information. And maybe to spin a little bit deeper, I can give a couple of examples. The first one that jumps into my mind is a story that I've heard about, the runaway forklift, right? That bangs into a system, and, now you've got, tanks or worse, the whole system is offline. With the way we operate today, if that doesn't happen when there's near a biannual audit, you have to hope that employee says, hey, you know what, I better go tell management that I just possibly destroyed this $500,000 fire protection system, and we should have somebody come out and check it out. That might not happen. And the idea that what could end up with is that you have the end customer, the maintenance company, and the OEM all pointing fingers at each other. No, you didn't do the, audit correctly or the review. No, it's a warranty issue. You got to fix it. So we all waste weeks arguing about whose fault it is, where if we just had a little bit of integrated sensing, we'd know the facts and move forward quickly, get that system back online, and keep lives and facilities protected. Another example that kind of, oh, Jason, I'm sorry.
Oh
Did
no,
you-
all I was going to say is actually, TLX ourselves, one of our customers actually had an issue with one of their end users some years ago, where the system that they had installed was near an area where there were big generators, and those generators, if there was about 2 or 3 of them that went off very quickly at the same time, it would actually send enough EMF through the system that it would move an electronic signal through the control panel and into the actuator line,
Wow.
and set the system off, right? But there was no signal that actually came from the control panel itself. So there was a question of, well, whose fault was it? Was it the actuator's fault? Was it the system manufacturer's fault? Was it the OEM users, or the end user's fault? Did they do something to it? And they, the investigation concluded that there was electricity being sent through the lines and actually, inadvertently setting off the actuator, and all of a sudden you have a $10,000 mess because you need to refill a tank. Well, who's that on?
Right. But that idea of being able to at least track right away that the actuator was fired based on electronic signal, that really focused the investigation. So
Right.
Again, it comes back to having the sensing to get enough information to solve the problem fast, and everybody moves on. Another example that jumps into my mind, just with what Jason was saying earlier about the kind of, changing the way that we work post-COVID, there seems to be more and more remote locations that don't have anybody there. It might be, a lot of electronics and servers and, air conditioner and a fire protection system, whether it's for oil and gas or the IT industry, it doesn't really matter. It's all valuable. But what I could see is maybe, one of those locations in the Middle East. In the summer, the air conditioner goes out and you can rapidly see the temperature rise from, 20, 25 degrees Celsius to over 50 degrees Celsius. And we all know what's going to happen then. All the electronics is going to be burned out. And, whether there's a fire or not, you're not going to be able to get a signal out of the panel, or, you won't be able to save any of the electronics that's there. Either way, it's a major loss, right? Just with the servers and the electronics. But if we have an ambient temperature sensor just incorporated in the fire protection system, now, like Jason was saying earlier, with the idea that you can get that information no matter how far away and see a trend line, right? Hey, you know what? I am seeing it go from 20 to 25 degrees Celsius to 28 degrees Celsius. Let's have somebody stop out there and double check. So when you have these examples, right, there are many others, but the idea is that this proven technology that's being used in other markets is going to offer a ton of value, so much so that I'm pretty excited to hear that the insurance industry is looking at it. I've talked to several people already, and what companies are examining is the value of what this sensing, feedback, monitoring could all have in terms of uptime, and what that uptime means to catastrophic payouts, both for total loss of facilities and buildings and equipment, and then also loss of life. When you look at it from the insurance company perspective, those are huge, potentially multi-million-dollar payouts. And the rumblings that I've heard already is that if they can increase uptime and save money, they're going to share those funds back with the insured in terms of discounts. And what I'd like to hope is that all this new technology can come together with some early adopters and innovators, and then the insurance companies will make it that it's basically no charge on an ongoing basis to have that stuff available. That's going to be exciting. But the thing, when you start with that, the difficult part is figuring out the technology, what sensors to integrate, what data is really valuable. Okay, now you have what you do with that information. And the vision that I have is taking that data and dropping it into a web dashboard, which allows you, whether you're at your computer, you're on your phone, tablet, anywhere you can get internet access. Like Jason was saying earlier, you can be aware of your system health, knowing that everything is working out, or if there is a challenge, that you can actually put somebody on it before the system is compromised. So having that dashboard is great, but one of the things that I think is a potential concern, let's be honest, we can't stare at our computers all day, every day there's a lot of other work to do, right? Staring at a dashboard, making sure that you're aware of a problem isn't really efficient. But where we can incorporate alert messaging and reporting, now we're talking some even more value, right? So you can be doing your normal job, whether it's managing the facility or going from site to site. And if there is a serious problem, you can get a text message, you can get an email to draw your attention to it. And that's time to dive back into the site, make sure your maintenance partner is aware, or if you need to follow up with the OEM, whatever you need to do, actually that can be done. And also with the reporting, the idea that, now if you have multiple sites across the whole region, you might be working with multiple maintenance companies to do your biannual audits. And then they all have different ways of following up with you, whether it's an email, whether somebody else download the PDF from our site, or we'll send you the form. And it's trying to keep that all together, where when you've got that dashboard now, you can actually run a report saying, hey, give me a listing of my last 2 years of annual audits. And what are the results? Oh, give me a list of all the problems I've had from all of my sites and the resolutions. And that data, right, in these reports, it can be shared with management, shared across the country, makes it much easier to run everything. So when you break it down to the different segments of the industry, end customers now have a lot less stress, right? The paperwork simplification alone is worthwhile, but more importantly, they can sleep nights knowing that somebody's watching over their systems, no matter where they're located around the world. From the maintenance and installers, that's a tough business, right? Recruiting and retaining employees is a starting point, but you want to get the most efficiency out of those guys and what they can, of the value that they can offer customers. So now imagine all of a sudden you have more awareness, not just of where the kind of annual audits need to happen, but the maintenance that needs to be done that's nearby. So if you've got people driving 3 hours away to do work, have them visit 3 sites. And best of all, you'll know what's wrong at those locations so you can fill the trucks with the stuff that's needed to do the fix in one visit. So when you add all that efficiency up, it's a lot of value both for the end customer and for the OEM. It creates such a, the end customer and the maintenance and installation company. Creates a lot more value in the relationship. And I don't want to leave out the OEMs, because let's face it, with that data, if they can see that there is an issue that's happening, repeatedly, that gives them the no-brainer roadmap for how they're going to innovate and improve their system to stay ahead of the competition. So for me, that's more than enough value, but it really doesn't end there. Great systems are going to have all that data, right? Now it's a matter of what you're going to do with it. We've all heard about artificial intelligence, machine learning, how that's impacting so many different markets. Well, fire protection space is not going to be any different. So envision, if you will, all these sites now that have maybe like 2-3 years worth of data. And now you can have the artificial intelligence system scan this data as it comes across into your dashboard. And I can see a time when it'll be able to look at it and say, wait a minute. The last time I saw this data set over a 2-week period, the system went down in 3 weeks. Okay, I need to do a predictive alert to make sure we maintain the highest uptime, right? So now that type of innovation offers even more value. And with what Jason was saying earlier about the globalization of standards and the opportunity for companies, whether it's out of the United States to export into the Middle East or Middle East to export to Europe and other places, it's huge opportunity because the big companies that exist today, if they don't act fast on this new technology, if they're not ready to adopt it, there's an opportunity for a small regional player to be the next big global behemoth, because they can add a lot of value, take advantage of the insurance companies offering discounts, come to market with something innovative, and now they're the big player 10 years from now. So I'm really excited to kind of see what happens, not just with the globalization of standards that Jason talked about, but with all this new technology. And in fact, Jason and I are going to be at Intersect coming up here next month. So I know there's been an opportunity to drop some questions in, but for those of you who might not be comfortable, maybe you want to talk more about connectivity or other aspects of standards or other issues in the industry that you might want to do on a one-on-one basis, let's just connect at the show. It'd be great to talk to you.
Thought-provoking and enlightening standards and codes are an essential part of our lives to keep the world safe. Several questions have been submitted, and we will endeavour to respond to all of them. But firstly, can I ask you, Jason, how you see the globalization of standards across the industry affecting the Middle East market.
Well, I mean, when you look at it, right? I mean, the Middle East with its growth potential in as developing and in some ways emerging as well. I think it's going to allow for some of the more regional companies in the Middle East, as Dennis was saying just a little bit ago, to really take initiative to come up with new technologies and even have the opportunity to take the current technologies that they have and begin to sell them in other countries' doorsteps, because the standards that they're looking to adopt in the Middle East with the things like I was mentioning with the UL and GCC, that's going to allow those companies to sell in places such as like the United States, or if they're adopting the same standards as UL and FIA and your alarm, which we're part of, is talking about how the EN and ISO spec is changing to adopt the same standards as UL does and NFPA. Well, then that already allows those technologies that they've developed to not only be sold into those UL and FM markets, but also into those EN and ISO markets as well. So I think there's a lot to be had in the Middle Eastern market for global fire protection in general.
You know what, Jason, right when you were saying that, I was thinking about, that potential of growth. And then also one thing I wanted to throw out is with that globalization of standards that Jason mentioned, it's not just the export. I think companies in the Middle East should be on the lookout for maybe an increase in competition from foreign companies trying to bring their technology in. So I don't want to present it as an innovate or die, but more of a be prepared for what the globalization of standards means. Take a look back at what Jason had to say earlier, and then even with the way he answered the question now, that it's not just for opportunity for growth, but you will see competition in the Middle East.
That's a great point to bring up.
Do you think that of the different standards bodies that one is leading the way more than others? Is, for a company looking at whether they follow the NFPA, the FM, or UL route?
Well, I mean, it really depends upon their target market. If you're a regional company who wants to branch out to more into Europe, you might want to start with the EN ISO type stuff, or if it just depends upon where you want to go, really. But again, these globalizations of standards are making it easy to basically pivot in one direction and say, I'm now covering all of this. So it really helps out tremendously that way.
Right, thank you. So often companies struggle with knowing when and where to invest in new technology. Do you think the fire protection industry is eager to adopt these new technologies, or will regulations need to be enforced before we start to see movement within the industry?
Well, in my experience, technology needs to be developed before it can be adopted. When I work with UL or NFPA specifically, it's open to the public. Let's say, for instance, right, NFPA 2001. Back in 2016, they wanted to adopt a supervision technology, and just as we were mentioning earlier, well, that public commentary started in 2013 or 2014, and there was technologies out there to do it, not necessarily in the way that we did it, but there were solutions for that. So they said, we need to monitor these removable devices. And again, there was technologies out there. There were, some sort of like proximity switches and stuff like that that can register whether or not that device is where it was supposed to be. But in going through that process, 2019 then seen NFPA 13, which is for pre-action deluge systems, then have a level playing field because somebody put in public commentary to say that water fire suppression systems should adopt the same technology as clean agents and inerts.
Yeah. And I wonder too, Jason, I've talked to a couple companies that shows where, they almost want to go the low cost route, and that for sometimes when new technology comes out, it's an additional cost to add to it, and they're trying to avoid that. And I think the standards go a long way to level the playing field with end customers in mind, right? Protecting property and people, and not making it just a lowest bidder market where none of those things matter.
Right. Yeah, and I mean it takes a long time, because like in a lot of ways, the AHJs, the authorities having jurisdiction, they're not necessarily forced into having the latest and greatest update on a standard. So they could be 2 standards, 3 standards previous, and if they are, they don't necessarily require the adoption of those same technologies. However, because of technology therefore being adopted, the OEMs in a lot of ways have just said, this is the product we're offering, regardless of whether or not you're on that standard.
Yeah.
Wendy, you're muted.
Wendy, I think you're muted.
I was, thank you. You've talked a lot about system readiness and monitoring. Some of our listeners might be wondering if it's worth it. Doesn't the addition of monitoring on a system expose everyone to more liability, lawsuits, etc.?
That's a really good question. I've heard that from a couple people. And for me, when I look at the way the world is, right, it's almost like we're a litigious society. There are way too many lawyers. And once a technology is available, which all of this stuff already is, now there's going to be a point where the lawsuits you're an automatic loser, right? Because the technology is out there and you're not taking advantage of it. You're putting people at risk. Seatbelts, airbags, right? If all of a sudden those disappeared from cars, do you think the car companies are not going to be sued? For sure, because the seatbelts are available. Why don't you have them in there? So there's going to be a tough reckoning for the industry people in the industry that want to put their head in the sand. They're going to run into a position where they are deficient in the technology and they're going to be held responsible. And then 2, they're going to be deficient in the technology and their competitors will be so far ahead that, it's almost like Darwinian economics. Companies do have to fail because of bad decisions, and ignoring technology and enhancements in performance, I think, is one of those things that sets you up.
Jason, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think Dennis explained it. I couldn't do any better on that one.
Yeah, maybe a little bit too blunt, right?
But to be honest with you, you are 100% correct, and I really do enjoy the example that you use with seatbelts and airbags, because that it really does, parallel exactly what you were talking about.
Yeah, and even in like airlines, right? When there's an airplane crash, the lawsuits name everybody, right? So if there's a building fire and people die, they are going to name the fire suppression company. And when they do their due diligence and start collecting emails and see of how they avoided to, save lives and went for a cheaper system, that is not going to help them at all.
Fair enough. Yes, I think litigious society governs so many things in every industry, all of our lives.
Right.
So one last question, though I think I can see somebody typing another one in. How is the information you shared with us today affecting what products TLX is working on? Perhaps you can share with us some of the new solutions that you'll be introducing in 2023.
Well, we've been working on a few things. We introduced some stuff in 2022 that we're trying to, market and really get out there in 23. One of them being our electronic weighing systems, as well as our electronic liquid level sensing devices. So for welded tanks, we'll say, for the fire suppression market, currently what they're doing to measure these levels in tanks is effectively trying to subjectively read a tape measure that they're pulling out of a tank, and then writing down what those levels are. What we want to be able to do is we want to be able to take the guesswork out of that. So adopting an electronic version that you can come up to and either look and see that there's an LED there that tells you, maybe green is good, yellow is declining, and red is bad. You need to decommission this tank and switch it out, or just being able to go up and push a button and it telling you that information, and being able to effectively pull that data and being able to read up to a millimeter's worth of resolution on that, but to again take out that subjectivity on the liquid level sensing technologies. And then with our in the other part of the fire suppression market, when it comes to cylinders themselves, they have seamless tanks. Well, you don't have ports for the liquid level sensors in seamless tanks. So with that, we've been developing suspended and platforms based weighing systems that effectively can measure up to within like 100 grams of agent loss, and being able to detect those micro leaks that Dennis was talking about earlier, because you can see those at a level where you can do preventative maintenance before you actually have to completely decommission a tank. Yeah. And then another thing too that we've been really striving for is our ATEX, or explosion-proof hazardous location actuators. With a lot of the mining and oil and gas industry going the way that it is right now, we wanted to create a solution that was much easier for our customers to use, so that they can adopt a hazardous location technology and basically take the systems that they have, utilize our product, and be able to bid on those jobs out there in the oil and gas industry, or in places like refineries and such. So that's a big one that we've really been working on.
What's interesting. Oh, I'm sorry, Jason.
And I was just going to say, and then while we're still looking into it, right? We're always going to try to be identifying what we can do in that lithium ion battery space, because as we mentioned, that's not going away. And in fact, it's the innovations in electrification are moving faster than what we can do to protect the stuff itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just the mobility space, right? With the way that those lithium ion batteries seem to be everywhere, there's a lot of opportunity there. And, the other thing I wanted to add with just, I see all the work that you end up doing with these different product developments, you and the rest of the engineering team. And I think it's interesting that you work with different OEMs on different innovations, right? Where one of them might be interested in the suspended system, the other one, it's the liquid level sensor, and then a third yet OEM is going for the platform system. It's just interesting to see, whether they're getting feedback from their customers or their staff. Everybody's got a different axe to grind on what they want to see, and your team is able to help them all out at the same time.
Yeah, well, we as a company, that's what we strive for. It's not about always what we want. It's help the customer define what it is exactly that they're going to need, and then helping them bring that to market.
Provide a standard sort of training for each of your systems and equipment and maintenance support for the individual who is having to use that equipment?
Well, for us, the equipment itself that we provide, we provide data and information to the OEMs, because we don't sell to the end user. We sell directly to the OEMs, because the OEMs have to get our parts tested with the agencies in their systems before it can be qualified. So while we're selling to the OEM selling to the end user. So for us, we may provide some information and support to the OEM, but it ends up being on them to then pass that information along. However, if anybody ever comes and asks us, because I get calls quite frequently from installation and maintenance people, saying, hey, I got XYZ product. I have some questions about it. Can you give me some information on it? Because obviously we're the manufacturer that's listed on that product. Who better to come to than us? And so, I'm always willing to answer questions about what that product happens to be and what those, what the nuances are of it.
Right.
Yeah, and people wonder, hey, why does TLX, speak to the entire industry when the company does so much work with the OEMs? Well, when you look at it from our perspective, we believe in community. We have a ton of engineering talent. Jason is dedicated to the fire protection industry. It doesn't make any sense to kind of hoard the knowledge that we develop. It's not something that we can monetize. Why wouldn't we share it to improve the industry? Because as the industry improves, as the industry grows, we're going to get our share of the business. So what's good for the industry is good for TLX.
And good for the safety of fire safety in the world as a whole.
Yeah, you got that right.
Brilliant. So before perhaps no more questions are coming in at the moment. Would you like to summarize what you've said today? Would you, a final thing that you would like to say to those who are listening to us?
Well, probably from my perspective, what I'd like to say is, don't be embarrassed about what you don't know. We're going to be at Intersect for those of you in the Middle East or traveling to the show. Do come by and let's just talk. You don't have to buy something from us. If you're an end user and you want to understand a little bit about sensing and technology and connectivity, I'll be happy to talk to you. It's just the way that we work. Jason has a ton of knowledge about what's going on with the standards, which is why he ran that total side of the presentation, let alone with his expert knowledge about the industry happenings. So I think that would probably be the number one thing that I'd leave you with.
Well, and with on the same note, but on the opposite side, we don't know what everybody else knows as well at the same time. So if there's something that the industry is looking for and is needed, we want to know what's going on too. So if you have a special interest that you're looking into, come talk to us about it, because we are all about collaboration and development and innovation. That's what we do as a company. So if somebody has anything that they want to speak to us about, don't be afraid to come up and talk to Dennis and I about whatever it is that you want to talk to us about.
Brilliant. So what is your stand number at Intersect Dubai?
That
it was on the slide. And
it was on the slide.
Yeah,
right.
I'm sorry. I'm embarrassed now because I just invited everyone to come see me and I don't know where I'm going to be.
Well, I can say that everybody comes to see an FME in Hall 6 on A9 and 10. We will bring you to TLX to talk to Jason and Dennis. So
good enough.
So we'll see anybody who is listening today at Intersect in Dubai next month. And I'd like to thank everyone who's joined us this morning, and please do not hesitate to continue sending in questions, which Dennis and Jason will address in the coming days or address them personally at Intersect. We hope you're leaving our event inspired and informed, and we hope you have a good day. And thank you to Dennis and Jason for their time this morning.
Wendy, that's booth 4G10.
Okay, so they're in Hall 4G10. That's
Yes.
where you can find TLX, and you'll find both Jason and Dennis.
Perfect.
Yep.
Thank
Thank you very much to everyone.